Luke here at Solid State Logic, and today we're taking a look at the SSL G3 MultiBus Compressor, our 3-band glue compression plugin based on the legendary SSL bus compressor, now with powerful per-band drive control, band linking and per-band external sidechain filtering capabilities, giving incredible flexibility in controlling dynamics, but also balancing mix elements together for ultimate control of submixes and the master bus. Key features of the G3 MultiBusComp include 3 bands of classic SSL glue compression inspired by the G series bus compressor, with the option to bring in external sidechain signals per band to affect the dynamics in unique and creative ways. Say you want to key in the kick frequency from a sidechain drum groove to trigger bass ducking only in the subs? That's not a problem. Or do you want to let the vocal sit perfectly in the mix by sidechaining only the mid-band frequencies against a guitar or piano group to give extra space on a climactic chorus? All easily achievable by using the filter on the sidechain to carve out the exact response and then let the G3 balance the rest of the signal with colour and control. So let's take a closer look through the GUI controls, starting with the input and output gains and threshold and makeup control, including a new feature called parameter mirroring, which is indicated by the link chain symbol. By holding Shift or pressing the link symbol will activate mirroring, and then when activated, moving one control will move the other control in the opposite direction. For example, you can hold Shift and move the input gain to drive the plugin harder, but automatically reduce the output level to compensate. Or you can reduce the compressor's threshold and simultaneously increase the corresponding makeup gain. At the core of the G3 MultiBusComp is the ability to have 3 independently configurable bus compressor frequency bands, with each band having a set of parameters that only affects this band. Starting from the top, we have the per-band bypass. Switching out this control means that no compression or drive will be applied to this band. To the right, we have then the audition band, where we can use this control to isolate only the processed audio in this band. Next, we then have the input metering, which displays the instantaneous level of the input to the compressor band. Then, the gain reduction displays the gain reduction applied to the signal in this band. Finally, the output metering displays the instantaneous level of the output of the compressor band. We then come to the compressor controls, which are obviously replicated for each compressor band when activated. Threshold sets the level at which compression begins. When enabled, the threshold and makeup gain control mirror a change to the threshold that will cause an inverse change to the makeup gain. Use this control to tweak the amount of compression. The makeup gain boosts the overall volume to the compressed audio to compensate for any reduction caused by compression, followed by the ratio, which determines how much the compressor reduces the volume to the audio when it exceeds the threshold, with higher ratios causing more significant volume reduction. The attack controls how quickly the compressor responds to loud sounds that exceed the threshold, allowing you to shape the initial response of the audio, with the release then determining how long it takes for the compressor to stop reducing the volume after the audio falls below the threshold, affecting the time it takes for the audio to return to its original level. Below this, we then come to the external sidechain, whereby activating this allows you to use an external audio source to control the compression for the band, enabling you to apply compression based on a different audio signal. The drive control adds saturation or distortion to the audio signal, giving it a more harmonically rich or aggressive character, modelled on SSL's 4K drive circuit. You can toggle drive in and out by using the power button and introduce a gain compensated drive from 1 to 11, with the LED indicating the amount of distortion being applied to the signal. Finally, the mix control allows you to blend the compressed and uncompressed audio signals, giving you the flexibility to adjust the balance between the original dynamics and the compressed sound. Moving to the band crossover assignments, the low frequency crossover sets the low frequency crossover point, where the highest frequency in the low compressor band is determined. Then, the high frequency crossover sets the high frequency crossover point and the lowest frequency in the high compressor band. The mid-band will affect all frequencies between the low-frequency crossover and the high-frequency crossover points, giving us our 3 controllable bands. Band linking allows you to combine the low and high bands and reduce the 3 bands down to 2 or even a 1-band compressor. For example, you might only want a low band and then a high mid-band. The low band link links the low mid-bands such as they are acting as a single band. In the same way, the high band link links the high and mid bands, such as they therefore act as a single band also. When a band is linked, controlled either by the mid-band controls, the band will become visibly disabled in the user interface, and you will also see the bands become combined in the graph view at the bottom of the plugin. The graph at the bottom provides two views, bands and sidechain, selectable under the bands tab on the left. These provide a way to visually set the frequency crossovers and thresholds, as well as access advanced sidechaining capabilities. When in bands view, the graph represents up to 3 frequency bands of processing. The threshold, represented by the horizontal line, can be dragged to set the compressor thresholds against the sidechain input level displayed in the background. We can then see the frequency crossover indicated by the vertical line, where we can also drag the vertical lines to set the frequency crossovers. Then, finally, we have the sidechain input level displayed in the background. You can also move the entire bands left and right by dragging this area. The graph can be switched to the advanced sidechain mode, which allows you to configure the filters applied to the sidechain in each of the bands. In this mode, you can unlink the filter response from the bandpass defined by the frequency crossover and perform advanced filtering on the sidechain signal. By default, the sidechain input to each compressor will be filtered using the low frequency and high frequency crossover parameters. The controls for the sidechain are selective across the top of each band section in the graph, starting with the sidechain listen to audition the input to the compressor sidechain after filtering. Next, the low frequency override and low frequency cutoff, where if we click low, we can then override the low cut applied to the sidechain input, and you can then set the cutoff frequency manually by dragging the L node. We then have the bell filter, where by dragging the B node in the graph, we can manipulate the linked frequency gain and Q controls. You can click bell to toggle the bell filter in and out here. Finally, the high frequency override and high frequency cutoff option is selected by clicking high to override the high cut applied to the sidechain input. You can then set the cutoff frequency of this filter manually by dragging the H node. As with all SSL plugins, G3 ships with a carefully designed package of presets to aid you in your workflow, and the factory presets are included in the plugin installation. Switching between presets can be achieved by clicking the left and right arrows in the preset management section of the plugin GUI, and by clicking on the preset name will open the preset management display. G3 also comes with a built-in undo and redo stack, in case your DAW doesn't handle this, whereby undo undoes the current action in the history stack and redo redoes the next action in the history stack. Bet you didn't see that coming. For HQ mode, click the HQ button to drop the plugin into high quality mode. This will increase the accuracy of the filters and quality of the saturation elements by enabling oversampling under the hood. And by clicking the zoom icon, set the scale of the plugin, letting you maximize screen real estate or enlarge the GUI for more maximum visibility when fine-tuning sidechain or crossover parameters. Obviously, we can't remember everything all the time, so the G3 plugin features built-in contextual help. To turn this feature on, click on the question mark in the bottom right-hand corner. Mouse over elements of the GUI to see some more information about the feature and click the tooltip to cycle through the pages, giving a short, definitive description of each parameter control. In this example, we're going to take the classic sidechain of the kick drum against the bass line and do this with G3. So I've set up G3 to start with as a single band compressor, as if we were working with a normal bus compressor. I've got the sidechain set up and it's coming from the kick drum, and this is what it sounds like first with no sidechain compression, and then I'm going to bring it in on a single band compressor. So hit that and let's press play. Now I'm going to bring in G3. So it's giving space to the kick, we're feeling that punch coming through, but obviously we're ducking the entire mid-range of the bass as well. Now what we can do with G3 is be a little bit more intelligent, and we're going to take the low band, unlink it from the mid band, and now I've got a separate compressor for everything under 100 Hz, so in the sub region. This is primarily where the fundamental of the kick drum is coming from. And if we do this, we're now not going to affect the mid-range of the bass line. So I'm going to take the sidechain out of the mid-range, into the low range, and now we're going to hear it first without G3 from the same point, and then I'll kick G3 in and you can hear the difference. So you can hear in that example, we've got loads more space for the punch of the kick, but we're not getting the ducking effect on the mid-range of the bass. We keep that bass feeling really solid and in the mix. But what we can do, we can flick this over in view to sidechain mode, and we can tailor how that kick drum frequency is affecting that sidechain. So if I press play again, you're going to see the sidechain frequency coming through here, but we can then either take the bell and find that fundamental of the kick for more accentuated sidechaining, or we could open up the second harmonic of the kick drum if we want something a little less subtle. And now we're just getting about 2 or 3 dBs of reduction. Take that sidechain out again. We're getting loads more, so I think we bring in that fundamental a bit more. We can obviously then change the attack and release times of that. I've got it really fast, so we're just giving that fundamental punch through the transient. So now I'm going to play with a slower attack and slower release and just see how that works. Get a little bit of a more subtle, lazier compression, giving a bit more groove to the bass line being sidechained. Going to take G3 out. Now we're getting the fundamental of the bass line coming through along with the kick, but still getting that separation and punch. So I think that's a really nice way of doing that. The G3 out again. Cool. I'm really happy with that, and yeah, you experiment with that, experiment with the different attack and release times, and then you just find how that groove's going to lock in. In this example, we're going to use G3 MultiBusComp on our drum bus. But first I'm going to play you the dry drums, and then I'm going to instigate G3 on the mix, and then we'll explain the settings. Right, going to add G3. Okay, so I think you likely have heard that the snare has got a lot more body, but it's a little bit darker, a little bit more tucked into the mix. The kick has got a lot more punch and power, mostly going to be from this drive control that I'll explain. And then we've got the high end has just sort of been tucked down a little bit. We're controlling that sizzle of the snare and the hi-hats. So the way I've set this up is we've got 3 bands. And the fundamental of the kick and the second harmonic are based in this low band here, when we've then got the crossover about 130 Hertz where the fundamental of the snare is starting to come in. Then we're sort of controlling that mid-range area, and then a crossover at 4.5 is where we're controlling the high end and the cymbals and the hi-hats and a little bit of the sizzle of the snare. Now, I've done this in order to bring out the attack of the kick but control that snare punch, because I know that that's going to be an issue later on when we start mixing the vocals. So let's have a listen now to the mix. I'm going to just turn in some of these bands and you'll hear the difference. So what I've used here is the high frequencies are being boosted a little bit more than they are being compressed. So I can bring out the attack of that hi-hat without having to bring the volume up in the mix. I'm sort of just bringing in that little spike. I've then got the control of the mid-range of that snare, like we discussed, and the thump of that kick is really pushing through. But for me, this isn't always just about controlling the actual bus. What I'm going to do now is show you a neat trick where I'm going to bring the vocal in on a sidechain and control the mid-range to add some clarity into the mix. And what I want you to listen to is the mid-range as I engage the sidechain, and you'll have a listen to see what we're doing there. So I think you'd have heard that example showing that the clarity of the vocal is enhanced because we're not masking it with the transient of the snare. Now, all I've done here is, using the sidechain view, is taken the bands notched into the mid-range, and I found the fundamental of the vocal with the bell control here, and just tightened up the control with the low and high shells, just to be able to find that fundamental of the vocal and affect the threshold with quite a lot of a fast attack, slow release, and quite a lot of control over the threshold. And what that's doing is, obviously, every time we've got a transient from the vocal, it's ducking the mid-range, but we're not affecting the kick drum or the high end. So we're retaining that clarity of the compressed signal of the snare without then losing that body that we'd sort of had in the mix. Now, I can control this further by balancing the mix control just in this band, which I'm going to do now, and we can find that sweet spot where we retain that punch of the snare without it masking the vocal. So that, for me, is a really clear example of the power of the sidechain controls with G3, is we can take that fundamental of the vocal, give it all the clarity it needs because we're giving it that space within the mix, while still retaining the entirety of the power of the drum bus at the same time. I would advise having a play with this with the demos, but going online and maybe reading the manual as well to see how these attack release from ratio controls on the sidechain are really going to open up how that works. But for me, that's my number one tip, is to sidechain different mix elements together with the sidechain filters and give yourself some clarity and space without losing all the power and excitement that the G3 is going to give to your tracks. Okay, so in this example, we're going to take a look at G3 MultiBusComp on our master bus. Now, first off, we'll listen to the mix with no compression on, and then we'll turn it on and I'll discuss my settings.
You know you won't find me following blindly. This was the last time I realized it's gone forever. Could have broke rules, could have played fools. Me and you, we had got nothing to hide. But I won't forget, let me stay with no regret. I won't miss you tonight.
So I think quite obviously in that example, you can hear the compression in the low end really firming up the bass and the kick together. So we're gluing that element whilst retaining the transient bounce. We've got a really slow attack and release on that. So it just gives a bit more groove to the transient and really pushes the low end thump. The mid-range is just being controlled and tickled. We're just making sure that any sneaky transients aren't being pushed through. Again, low threshold, but the attack is slow, the release is on auto, so it's just sort of tickling that. And then the top end, again, quite a low threshold, and the makeup gain just pushing that up, just a little bit of brightness into the mix. We can use G3 as a tonal sort of palette as well as compression. Let's have a listen again, and what we're going to do is turn out some of these bands and you'll be able to hear the difference. You'll agree that it might feel subtle, but as soon as you take some of those bands away, you can really feel that depth of the mix drop out. It feels a little bit stark, especially in the low end. You're just losing that sort of pushing bounce to the mix. Mid-range clarity disappears, and then taking the high band out, just losing all that air in the mix. And all we're doing is adding a touch of gain, a little bit of compression, but I've made sure the output is matched, so we're not adding gain for the sake of adding gain. It is a tonality and colour change. Okay, so we've had a look at G3 Comp on multiple sources, our drums, sidechaining, and on our mix bus. For me, it's such a powerful plugin, not only for the power of the compressor. To have 3 bus compressors in one plugin is fantastic, but the ability to sidechain between channels and add the drive controls is amazing. It allows so much more creative control of the dynamics without flattening an entire mix or having really heavy-handed dynamic control. Go check it out, go check out the demo, try it on your own mixes, get deep into controlling with the sidechain filtering, and we'd love to hear what you think. But for more information on this and all the other plugins, go check out solidstatelogic.com and check out the YouTube channel with more tutorials and tips and tricks.